Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a dynamic electric effect from scratch using GIMP to create a texture in Unreal Engine's Niagara system. This technique can be applied to anything from energized meshes, electrifying attacks, all the way to lightning strikes. To follow along, the texture I'm creating today is available for download on my Patreon, and the link will be in the description. And if you're one of my exclusive Patreon subscribers, you'll have access to the full project files. If you enjoy these tutorials, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future episodes. To start with, I've already imported these textures, but I'll jump over to GIMP real quick and show you how I made the important one, which is this line, and then I have the smoke here that is used just for some noise. To begin with, I did a file new, and for this one, I'm going to do a 1024 by 1024. This black background here. I want to select my brush, my paint tool, and I'm just going to do a small line here. And the idea is I want half the time for the line to be on one side and the other half to be on this side. So a couple ways we could do this. Since we want this to be tileable and be able to scroll, we don't want to do all the way over like this. So I'm going to do about a quarter of the way down this way and then come over like this and then kind of bring it back this general area. It doesn't have to be perfect. Another thing we can do, and you can play around with this all that you want and get the look that you want, but then you can go through and add some other little lines and highlights and things like that. Doesn't really matter. Just get it to look like something that would look good in your game. Then you want to go to this tool here. If you have the blur, you can right click and select smudge. And I'm going to turn this brush up a little bit, and you might have to play with your hardness and force, but you kind of just want to smudge them around so they don't look like lines and kind of look like they naturally belong in here. And kind of just do this. You can blur it, add more lines, move stuff around however you want to kind of get the look that you want for some sort of lightning effect here. And once you do this and you're happy with it, and maybe you want some line here to be more faded out. And like I said, you can right click and go to blur, and you can kind of blur stuff as well if you want it to look a little more faded. Once you get something like this, to make this tileable, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to layer, transform, and then offset. Or you can hold shift control O. And since we want this to tile up and down, then we're going to do by height divided by 2 and then hit OK. And to make this tileable, we just need to get rid of this hard line here. And to do that, we're going to grab the smudge tool, and I'm just going to kind of smudge them into each other. And there's lots of techniques you can use to do something like this. You can blur them, you can draw over it and just kind of start fresh. You could grab your paint tool here and just kind of draw a line through here and then get that smudge tool back and kind of make it look a little more natural in there. A lot of things you could do here, but really as long as that hard line is gone, then it'll look decent whenever it's tiling. And make sure you use your eraser tool to get rid of anything you don't want. And then I like to go through just at the end and grab the blur and kind of blur through here just in case there's any hard line left. But that looks pretty good. And I also like to do transform, offset, and by height divided by 2 again, just to make sure that it's how we left it. Sometimes if you start editing really far down, you might create another hard line. So it's best to kind of check a couple times if you continue to edit and fix those hard lines. Then you'll export that as a PNG and bring that into your project. The next one you want to do is just some sort of noise. And again, it would be the same method here. You might have to do your left and right as well if you do a full page. And I'll jump over to my noise here, and you just want something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, really for the noise, we're not going to see it. It's going to just make our texture look like it's moving, or our material look like it's moving. So kind of just anything that's painted. You can even use just the 3D paint and the spray can and make kind of a cloudy smoke. So now that we have our textures, and again, these textures will be free in my Patreon, so you can go download those to follow along or just make your own. So let's go ahead and make our materials. This first one I'm going to just call lightning. And for this material, we're going to do, like we typically do with blend mode, we're going to go translucent and shading model unlit. Let's go ahead and start with our particle color. And off this, we're going to go RGB to multiply. And this is going to go into emissive color. Same thing off our alpha. We're going to come into a multiply, and this will go into opacity. And we're going to get a radial gradient here, and we're going to multiply. And I'm actually going to plug this into the bottom one just to keep things clean. And this is going to plug into both of these. And then now we're going to build into what's going to multiply with our radial gradient. And this is going to be kind of involved, but at the same time, I think it's kind of worth it because it's going to be pretty customizable. So if you can create this, you can play with it a lot and get a lot of different looks for materials even beyond electric. So definitely a good material to have in your pocket. But for this texture, I'm going to grab this line here, and I'm going to come off my RGB. I can do it off my red or RGB. It's just a grayscale, so really you won't get too much of a difference here. But I'm going to come off my RGB and go to multiply. And I also know I'm going to run this through a power. And then that's what's going to plug into this. Give ourselves some more room here. With this radial gradient, I know I'm going to only really use the density, and I know I want to change this inside of my Niagara system. So I'm going to grab a dynamic parameter here, and I'm just going to set my fourth parameter. I'm going to name it density, and I'm going to plug that into density. And something that I like to do is just in parentheses, I like to put what I think the default value is going to be for this. And if we change it, then we'll come back and change the name, just so when we're in the Niagara system, we know what to default it back to. I also know, but we'll play with this as we go, but I know this is going to be negative zero point 0.3, and I'll show you what happens as we move that around and why we're going to do that. But the thing we're going to multiply this by here, I'm going to get text chords, and then I'm going to grab a mask. And I just want the G, which will create, and I can actually show this. If we start previewing and set it to this, we'll get this gradient coming from the top. I will also know that I'm going to run this through a power. And if we start previewing this node, you'll see this power affects how much gradient we have. For now, I want to do 1.5. And then I'm going to actually copy these and paste them down here. So what I want to do is get a gradient on the bottom and the top of this. And to do that, the only real difference that we need to make here is out of our mask, I want to do a 1 minus and plug that in. And then I'm going to multiply these two together. And this is what I'm plugging in up here. So if I plug this in, right now, if I say start previewing this, you'll see the top and bottom. And currently I could take these both way down and get them black. So you can kind of play with that, get it where you want it. I want to do something like this for now, just to get rid of those edges. And we can stop previewing this now. So you can kind of see the fading there. The next thing I'm going to do is come off my texture sample here. And I know I'm going to do a panner. And for my speed, I'm going to come down and I'm going to get a pin vector. And I only want this to pan in the Y direction. So I'm going to come off here and get a constant and leave this at 0. The other one, I'm going to come out of a multiply here. And I'm going to multiply, I want this to scroll down. So I'm going to do -1. And this one I'm going to set in a dynamic parameter so that I can control the speed of my of the pan. So I'm going to grab a dynamic parameter and I'm going to name parameter 3 speed, and I'm going to default that to 1. So I'm just labeling this 1 so that I know I want to choose 1 inside of my dynamic parameter. The next thing I want to do off my coordinates here, I want to do a few things here. First, let's grab text chords. And for these, I'm going to multiply. And I'm going to multiply these by an append vector. And for this, I'm going to affect these separately. So the number 2 is going to be my V, and number 1 will be my U. And again, both those I want to default as 1, so I'm just labeling that there. Now I can plug these directly in right here. The next thing off of this multiply here, I'm going to do an add. And this is where I'm also going to actually do a saturate real quick. I know I want to saturate this to clamp it between 0 and 1. So this is where we're going to get a lot more motion here inside of our material. For this add, I want to come down and get a texture sample. And this texture sample I'm going to set to that smoke or noise, whatever you're using for yours. And off of my red here, I'm going to do a multiply. And I want to multiply this by a low number, and I'll also show you what happens when we play with that. And I want to plug this into my add. And now you can see it kind of looks a little more animated, dynamic. The less we do here, the less animated it looks. And the more we do, the more animated it looks, almost to where it looks unnatural. But in between 0 and 1 is where you get a lot of cool action. So you can kind of find the number that works with the texture that you created. For this one, I found that 0.2 is a pretty good look. And also, this is static as well. So just as it passes over, you see that noise. So what we want to do is also add a panner on this one. So I'm going to come off the UVs here and add a panner. And for this, I'm going to, again, affect the speed. So I want to grab an append vector. And for this one, I'm going to make the Y direction stay still. So I'm going to grab a constant here and leave that at 0. And off my X, I'm going to do, want to come out of a multiply here, and this is going to be the speed multiplied by some variable or some constant here. So I'm going to set this to 0.5. That's kind of the look that I liked for mine. So this is really all we're going to do in here for now. Some things that you can change to play with this if you want more or less gradient here, you can do that. But I'm going to leave mine at 1.5. The other thing that you can mess with is this power. So if you go 2, it's going to be pretty faded. Um, if you skip the power altogether, you still don't get anything. I had to kind of play with this to find the number that I wanted. So I actually discovered if you go 0.2, you start to see it. And once you get in your Niagara system, when you go really emissive, you'll see that kind of. Um, 0, you really see it, but going in your negatives is where it really starts to show up. So I did negative 0.3, and that seemed to be a good look. So this is our first material, and that's all we're going to do in here. Let me, as always, I'll kind of give you a second to pause the screen and catch up if you need. So there's that section, that section, and then that section. And remember, this is translucent and unlit for the blend mode and shading model. So the next material we're going to create, I'm actually just going to duplicate this lightning material. I'm going to copy or Control C and Control V, and then let's open this one up. And the only difference we're going to make in here is I want this to be negative 0.2. See what else I changed here. For this, we wanted to actually flip our X and Y here. So I want to multiply the speed. Oh, I'm actually wrong on that. I want to just change the speed to 1.5, positive 1.5. I think that will be good for that one. Still 0 here. And still 0.5 there. In this one, the only thing we're actually going to change, other than those minor tweaks, is we're going to change. I'm going to come to this dynamic parameter here. And for my V, I'm actually going to tell myself I want to default this to -1. And when we do that, um, we're actually going to get a pretty cool little effect here. And I can break this real quick and show you what it'll look like. That's actually what it's going to look like. If we do a -1 here, we'll get this kind of like just a straight line. So we're going to kill it real quick and it'll look like it's flashing back and forth. So it's just something I kind of played around with and got a look that I liked for this material. It won't look like this once we change it in the Niagara system, but the next thing we're going to do actually is work on our Niagara system. So right click Niagara system, and I'm just going to do an empty. And I'm going to call it lightning, but it's going to have plenty of other use cases for this. But the first one I am going to create is going to be the lightning, and then I'll show you how to make a pretty cool mesh with it as well. With this also, it's only the way I'm setting this up, it's actually only going to be um, in the Y direction. So It's going to be pretty limited. I can do another video on some solutions for making this able to rotate and things like that. But for now, we're just going to do it like this. I'm going to do self, and then I want to set this to infinite. I'm going to add a spawn burst instantaneous and just a 1 there. And then I'm going to go ahead and set that sprite material for this lightning 1. And now we see our material here. Inside of the initialized particle, I'm going to set the life, a direct set, pretty high right now. And then for the color, I'm going to do a direct set. And I just want this bluish teal color. The next things that are important are sprite size. I want to do a non-uniform. And for this, I'm going to, in the X direction, just kind of go maybe an 80. But I'm going to really stretch this out in the Y direction. And there it is. That's pretty much what we're going to make. We're going to customize it a little bit more. But this is pretty much the look that we're looking for. A couple things here. Let's go ahead in the particle update and add that dynamic material parameter. And since I already wrote my defaults in, I know that's what I'm going to set these. So I'm going to go 1, 1, 1, and 0.8. And we get that very similar look. Some things you can change. You can mess with your density to get it really emissive, or fade it some more. Kind of whatever look you want. But I'm going to go with the 0.8 there. Then I'm going to copy and paste this one out here. And for this one, things that are different, I'm going to change the color to be a little different here so that we can tell them apart while we're making some changes. But like I said, in this one, for the dynamic parameter in the V, set this to -1, and you get this cool little almost flashing back and forth lightning here. And some things you can do is you can do a random here and set it really low, and it'll look like it's just flashing. So get a little cooler little kind of a lightning strike inside of this. So there's all kinds of ways you can play with this. But this is the first Niagara system complete, and that's all it's going to be for this. So you can use this as a lightning strike by changing this one as well to real short, and you can start getting some lightning effects that way. Make it last a little longer. That would be lightning, or you can do where it's some sort of energy beams that's just kind of continuously spraying that way. That's the first Niagara system. For the second one, and this one's pretty cool, and this is going to be the one for the static mesh. I'm just going to copy this first system and paste it back in here. And for this one, the difference here is I'm going to get rid of this one for now. We could actually keep it, but I'm just going to do this. I want to get rid of spawn burst instantaneous, add a spawn rate. And for the spawn rate, let's set it to 100 for now, but this is something that you could adjust to get different looks. For this, I'm going to do random, and between 0.1 and 0.8. I'm going to keep that same color, and I'm going to do a uniform here and just leave that at 10 for now. And I also, for the sprite rotation mode, I want to set this to random. The next thing I want to do in the particle spawn is I'm going to add an initialize mesh reproduction sprite. And for this, I'm just going to set this here, but you could set this as a user parameter and change that inside of a blueprint if you want to not have to change this every time or create one for each, but I'm just going to do this real quick and simple and kind of show the look of this. And make sure if you get the CPU access there, do a fix now. And now we see our sprites already showing up. A couple things. I'm not going to change the particle size here. You can, and kind of get what you're looking for. But for now, I'm going to leave that as 1 because I'm actually going to, in the particle update, I'm going to do an update mesh reproduction sprite. I'm going to set that to that same static mesh. And inside here for my sprite size, I'm actually going to set these, for now I'm going to do 25 and 25. But what you saw there is I like to do it like this because you can kind of change the X and Y to get some unique looks if you don't want it to just be that round sprite. So like that, it's a little flatter. If we go 5, it's even more flat. And maybe that's what you want for your look. Looks pretty cool, but I'm going to keep mine square right now just to get kind of that more curved look to it. But play with these numbers however you or whatever best fits your project needs. In my particle update, I'm also going to add a scale color. For the alpha, I'm just going to have this float from curve and do that linear ramp down. Also going to add a scale sprite size. And in the scale sprite size, I want to do this ease in. Next thing, I'm going to go ahead and add my dynamic parameter in here. Again, I gave myself my defaults, so I'm going to go ahead and set those. The speed, I'm actually going to set that separately. I'm not going to use this as a default. I'm going to use a random range float here. And I'm going to do a 0.8 to 1.2 just to get a little bit of random life on it, or random speed and animation to it. So I think that looks pretty good there. And that's our next material or our next Niagara system. So let's go apply this one to our character. To do that, I'm just going to go into whichever character I'm using. Another note, if you're not used to using this, for these meshes here, this is going to be the static mesh of whatever character you're applying this to. So for me, I'm using this third person character, which is this Quinn Simple. So yours would be whatever is in your character's mesh here. Here, I'm going to go ahead and add a Niagara particle system. Not going to worry about naming it, but in the Niagara system asset, I'm going to go ahead and set that to the Lightning 2. And I want to keep auto activate on just so we can see this. And if I jump over to the viewport, we can come and look at it. And if I go play, then we can see it. And I like this better than a previous one that I did. This looks animated and looks natural, and it kind of looks like the electricity is flowing over the body rather than just kind of appearing in front of it. So this is a pretty cool electric effect. Some things we can do to tweak this. If we go to spawn rate, we can jump this up. And make it look even more electric. Or we can go down with it and set it even less if you just want a little bit of electric. Lots of uses for this, so it's a pretty cool look. And then again, if we go ahead and pull our first lightning out here, we can kind of go look at that. Just a cool little beam that can be used for a lot of things. The last one I want to show you is I'm going to copy number 2 and paste it in here. And let's open that one up. And for this one, instead of the mesh reproduction sprites, let's do a um, we're going to do a static mesh location. I had it to begin with. And this, let's go ahead and find the mesh that we want to use. Let's see, I can do I'll bring a sphere in here. Actually, let me go ahead and make a blueprint here, and then I'll add a static mesh in, and we'll just decide which one we want to use in there. So I'm going to make an actor blueprint, and I'm going to just call this electric mesh, and then let's open that up. And inside my, let's just add a sphere inside of our default scene root. And I'm just going to leave this a basic color here. And so go back to your Lightning 3, and let's do that sphere. This one's the starter content props, and this one is content shapes. Let's check which one. Basic shapes sphere in the engine. Is that one of our options? Yep, so this one. So select the engine, basic shapes, and then do your fix now on your axis. And you can already see that coming through there. Here, we can change the particles in the initialize particle here, this particle size. So I'm going to do a 0.1 to 1.2, leave the color the same. And here's where we'll change those sprite sizes. And I want to do something like that. Again, keeping that random there. And really the rest of this is going to stay the same. We could always change the speed here and maybe go to 1.5 to get kind of a little more electric animation. But you can play with these as you see fit for your project. And that's going to be it for that. So now let's go ahead and inside of our blueprint here, add a Niagara particle system. And the Niagara system asset, let's add that Lightning 3. And we can already see it showing up here. So let's go drag that into the world. And we'll just drag a couple out here. So you could do this to all kinds of static meshes and make it look like they're being electrified as well. And I think that's going to do it for this real quick tutorial on this real custom dynamic electric effect that you can draw yourself and not have to pay visual effects artists to do this for you. It's real simple to do it yourself. And really using GIMP allows you to customize and change things as you need. And that's going to do it for our custom electric effect brought to life in the Niagara system, from the unique texture that we created in GIMP to the application here in Unreal Engine. This dynamic effect is all yours to play with. Remember, it's fully customizable from meshes to attacks to lightning strikes. This effect is as versatile as it is stunning. If you wish to save some time or want to dissect this project more, head over to my Patreon. Exclusive subscribers can download the project files. For those of you following along, the texture is available for free on my Patreon. Your support on Patreon helps me continue creating and sharing these tutorials with you, and it's always appreciated. Before you go, if you found this tutorial helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified of the next tutorial. Thanks for watching. As always, happy developing, and I'll see you in the next one.